And now,
here's your host, Scott Foster.
Hey, happy Monday, guys. Thanks for joining me. I just want to take the opportunity to celebrate this day in history. 35 years ago on this day, what were you doing? Some of you may not even been born yet. I was, and I was one of the lucky ones that got to listen to Live Aid. Live Aid was this huge, huge event, a worldwide concert with two main concerts, one held in Wembley Stadium in London, and one held in Philly here in the United States. But there's also some other pockets of concerts happening in Russia, in Canada, in Japan, Germany, West Germany, and Australia. It was this huge movement to bring to the national attention, the world attention, the plight of folks in Africa who were dying for lack of food, lack of nutrition, lack of medicine. And it started off, if you may have heard, around Christmas time, every year, the song Do They Know It's Christmas, which was the brainchild of producer, musician, leader of the Boomtown Rats, Bob Geldof, and also producer, writer, and leader of Ultravox, Midge Ure. And they had this song, they made the single, it came out, but then during his concert, or after his concert, Boy George, leader of Culture Club, an 80s iconic group, if you don't know who they are, went to Bob and Mike and Ure and said, hey, let's do something bigger. Let's have some kind of concert for this. We need something more monumental. And from that was born the Live Aid event. A huge task, a huge, especially at the time, back in 1985, the technology for simulcasting and video streaming was not what it was today. MTV was a child comparatively speaking. And so the opportunity for putting this all together was a monumental task. And so on this day, noon o'clock in London at Wembley Stadium, Status Quo kicked off the concert. And mostly because it was a UK show, a UK stadium, UK crowd, notably most of the bands were from the UK. So you had Status Quo, you have Style Council, the Boomtown Rats, and Ultravox, Loudness, more of those Spandau Ballet, and other folks that were more familiar to that crowd. And that concert went all the way and played until, particularly when they came off at about almost 8 o'clock London time. And around 2 o'clock here in the United States, Philly time, the Philly show started and began with Joan Baez coming out singing Amazing Grace and her version of We Are the World. And then the first band to come out at the Philly show, of course, hometown heroes of Pennsylvania, the Hooters. Again, at the time, a big 80s band, one of my favorites. Of course, I never got to see them live, one of the shows that I never got to see. But it was this huge, huge undertaking. And some of the biggest names were there. Did you get to see it? Did you watch it? If you were around, did you see it on TV? Did you listen to it on the radio? I mostly listened to it on the radio, but I did it also on the TV and watched it when I got home. I had that day I was actually at a swim meet. It was our usual Saturday rec swim team meet, and we were swimming in the morning. So I got to actually hear and listen. I had my boombox and everything, and people, we weren't swimming, we were gathered around listening. We started out, it was 8 o'clock in the morning, so we got to listen to Wembley Stadium. We got to listen to all of the feed from Wembley, and then transitioned into the show at Philly. So it was really cool for us to kind of learn. For me, some of these bands were the first time ever hearing them, particularly the ones from the UK, and knowing who they were. Among which U2 was one of those bands in the UK that I'd never heard of until that moment, and they sang beautiful rendition of of Bad, and I was that was my hook. I still wasn't at that point. Still wasn't totally tied into U2. I didn't investigate until almost a year later when I heard them at another uh, kind of found, philanthropic concert, the Amnesty International. Um, but yes, and of course, if you've watched Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie based on Freddie Mercury, you all are aware. You're aware of what Queen did that day, and it was their kind of back together gig, and they killed it. And it you would have thought that they closed the show, but it was actually midday. We were actually a couple hours before the end of the show, but it was a almost 15 minutes of greatness, probably a little more than 15 minutes of greatness that happened there. And it was really, really cool. The event, just to see them play, hear them play even, and hear the crowd kind of react to what was going on in front of them. And of course, anybody who was a Queen fan knew the rumor of them playing there and was excited to see them back together again. Now, you may not know this if you are a historian or know anything about Live Aid, then you probably do. Phil Collins played the first third of the show, and he played his set, got on the Concorde, which at the time was the airplane that would go from London to JFK in 3 hours or less. Amazing, amazing ride. And he hopped on that plane, flew to JFK, helicoptered over to Philadelphia, and prepared for his set, which actually he had two things going on here in Philly. First off, he was going to play his own stuff, but then he was going to play drums for the newly reassembled version of Led Zeppelin, who played Philly Live Aid for the first time since they lost John Bonham, their drummer extraordinaire. So that was kind of amazing to see and hear, and just to have that opportunity. As far as concerts go, what it did to bring people together, including of all things, bringing back together in Philly Black Sabbath. And if you know anything about Black Sabbath, they broke up, and there was huge hostility between Ozzy Osbourne and the rest of the band. But they came together, played 3 songs, introduced by Chevy Chase, by the way, and it was quite a thing to see for Black Sabbath fans. Just for anybody a fan of music, anyway. The way they punch out opportunities and sing and get you going. It was definitely probably one of the more louder, and I know Judas Priest played as well, but one of the louder acts of the time. So it was very, very cool. But this ambitious 16-hour event was pretty cool, and in all, it raised over $100 million. And even though there was rumors and people were saying that if some of the money didn't go to where it was supposed to, it got skimmed for other governments. The government in Africa got it because Bob Geldof and his people weren't allowed to actually give it out themselves, and they had to go through the African governments. So there was, of course, some slimy scheming and skimming off the top. Nonetheless, some of the music, and some of the money did make it there, and it was beginning of raising the awareness. The end result of the famine in Ethiopia, in particular, but also in that part of Africa, and continuing on well after Live Aid to give worldwide support money, medicine for the starving, dying folks in Africa. Did you get to see it? Did you hear it? One interesting tidbit that I learned is that it's estimated that at the time, 40% of the world population, 40%, either watched it or listened to it. And I think that's pretty amazing, especially, again, back in that day. And it was pretty quite a treat. Now, not just the bands. You didn't just have bands playing, but you also had celebrities opening up and hosting and introducing the bands. Here in the United States, at the Philly JFK Stadium, Jack Nicholson was the host of the concert. And so you had those people introducing the fans, introducing the bands, and keeping everybody going. And so it was just an all over the world and full on performance. Again, but not everybody knew about it. Fun fact: on his flight on the Concorde, Phil Collins ran into Cher. Everybody knows who Cher is, and he was talking to her about what he was doing, where he was going, what he had just done, and she had no clue about it. And she was excited and wanted to be involved. He told her, in no simple terms, just show up. So she showed up and she participated in the finale of the Philly show when they sang "We Are the World." So just fun things to learn, and just knowing that while though it was something that many people participated in, not everybody knew about it. And in fact, there were some people, bands, as you will, that were either invited or didn't even that were invited, but also some people that were invited and asked to perform, they did not, and they chose not to show up. For instance, some of the bands and singers that were invited but didn't show up for one reason or another. Bananarama, who were kind of hot at the time, they maybe were fizzling out a little bit back then. They were invited. They did not get to. They declined because they hadn't toured in a while. In a lot of clubs, a lot of bands, that was their answer when they were asked and invited to do so. And Boy George, who actually, it was his brainchild that helped push Bob Geldof and Ore into this. They were invited, but their manager didn't get it to them. They didn't get the information to them in time. So those kind of things. Very popular UK group, Def Leppard, especially at that time. They were invited, but if those of you that remember, around that time, a few years before, their drummer had a car accident, lost part of his arm, and so they declined as they were trying to recover from that and also get their next album out so that they didn't lose their standing in the world as a major rock group. The Eurythmics, again, another UK band, very, very big at the time. They were supposed to play at Wembley, but lead singer Annie Lennox suffered from throat problems and they couldn't play. Billy Joel. Now, the 80s, early 80s was beginning of his career. He in terms of going on his own, and he played a bunch of shows. He's already put out a bunch of albums with a band, but he declined an opportunity to play at Philly because he couldn't get his band together, and because he was concerned and a little bit stage fright, for lack of a better word, that he wouldn't be able to play in front of a stage all by himself. Can you imagine that? Billy Joel, who now sells out monthly shows in ways 6 months in advance at Madison Square Garden, didn't want to play in front of a stadium full of people. And now it's what he does at least once a month. And pretty interesting about that. Van Halen, they were asked. They declined. So again, not everybody was into it. Not everybody wanted to for one reason or another. And not everybody had was selfish about it. It was other reasons. Some of the bands didn't want to do it because they wanted to make sure where the money was going. They weren't convinced that it was going to go and have go to Ethiopia. So all those things, and which is a reasonable reason. And so it was a really kind of big event to kind of pull off, and they did it. And if you saw or heard any of it, both shows ended with huge finales. And like I said before, Philly ended with the version of "We Are the World," and Wembley they ended with "Do They Know It's Christmas," the song that started all off and created this whole phenomenon. There is just a little history about the major event that took place today, 35 years ago. And if you haven't heard anything about Live Aid before, or it was like, oh my God, I forgot all about that. That was such a great event. Get on Spotify, get on whatever you stream music from. You can get some playlists. You can get some music from that. It's just a really cool thing to reminisce and to bring back and think about and enjoy. So I encourage you to do that, especially if you weren't around for Live Aid, didn't know what it was, and this is the first year hearing of it. So go check it out. Go listen to it. Go find, because this music, this live, not just the music from these bands, do that afterwards, but find the Live Aid versions of this music live. Because some of these bands, some of this music, some of these songs live was just killer. Especially Queens, especially U2's, and really good opportunity to hear some Petty live, some Kenny Loggins, and Neil Young even, Power Station. Power Station, and if you haven't had a chance to know who they are and hear their words, go have fun with it. Thanks for listening. I'll be back some other time with some other historical piece or just other random talking. You can catch my show here on Mixlr or SoundCloud, AD Foster. I usually throw down some house music, but I'll throw down whatever you want. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. And go enjoy some great music, whatever that may be.